can't believe what good companies Gwen is able to pick out for you to look at. And the timing of looking at these companies couldn't be better for you as an audience of investors. Our markets have been decimated over the last 6 years. We're finally turned the corner. We're going into a good resource market, and it's going to last a while. I know it's hard to believe. We're all a bit nervous. Gold was just down near $1,100. We were shaking in our boots. But really and truly, I think we've turned the corner. Now, after listening to all these great presentations and all the good things about getting into production, the part I really liked was he mentioned market caps, 200 million, 300 million, well, I don't know what the others are, but they're big market caps. Well, we're right at the other end of that scale. We're the explorationists. We're looking for something new. Look at that. We have Ireland up behind me. I'll bet you there's only a few people in here that ever heard of gold in Ireland. Anybody? Aha, a few. It all started back in Scotland, back in the 1980s. And a deposit called a Conanish was found. And it was on a big regional fault. And that fault comes down through Ireland and on into the Atlantic, and it ends up actually over in Newfoundland. But from that beginning in 1987, the seed of thoughts of, well, maybe there's other places along this fault that there could be gold. A guy by the name of Professor Conroy came up with the idea of looking in Ireland for the same environment back about 1987, or 88 maybe. And from that humble beginning, they have now got deposits developing at Curragno. Curragno is roughly a 5 million ounce deposit now being developed by Dalradian, and they're doing a great job on it. There's Kavanagh, owned by Galantis. It's just getting going. They've operated on a small basis, and guess what? They wanted to sell their gold as jewelry gold, made in Ireland gold. And this somehow has a nice ring to it. Well, look at Playfair has been around for a while. We were looking for things to do. Going back about 4 years ago, we were broke. The markets were crappy. We had overestimated or I should say underestimated the time of the drudgery we were going to have to live through. We made a deal with the guys that had an idea about following up on this gold in Ireland. So Neil Briggs, our geologist partner, met a guy by the name of Rick Parker back in Newfoundland in about 1977. Well, Rick Parker and Andy Bowden picked up on this idea of gold in Ireland. They looked at Curragno and they figured, well, is there any other spot in Ireland where we might find similar type of mineralization? And they picked an area called the Ox Mountains, which is over in the Republic of Ireland. So it's actually a different country than Ireland where Curragno and Galantis is. Incidentally, the deposit founded in Scotland in 1987 was found by Rick Parker and is called Conanish. So there's a lot of experience between Andy Bowden and Rick Parker, and when they made their little deal, and they call themselves Beaupark, they set about prospecting. Boots on ground. No internet, no whatever. They drove, first they accumulated a big pile of ground, it's about 700 square kilometers. They drove the roads looking at the rocks that the farmers had taken out of the fields, put on the fences. And surely the farmers and the homeowners like pretty rocks, so the odds are that they're going to take some nice quartz-bearing rock and put it on the top of their fence rather than at the bottom. It's an easy way to traverse the countryside and see if there's anything interesting. They spent a couple years doing this out in the fields, looking at rocks, looking at fences. And after a couple of years, they had 2 different areas where they had found some float. The first one was in Clunacool. I'll get to that in a minute. The second one was in Cabra. And off the basis of that float, they set about trying to make a deal. They spent a year and had a false start with one group. And then Rick Parker contacted Neil Briggs, and we made a deal with them. Okay, keep in mind, this is still in the dullest part of the market. So the deal we think, is rather unique. Fortunately, there was no money around, so there was no such thing as property payments. So the deal we made was that we would earn into their Irish company by spending money on their ground. They, in turn, would get shares of Playfair. And at the end of the day, they would have a good position in Playfair. We would own 90% of their company with the option to get the other 10% if the project goes all the way. So after spending $2.23 million on exploration, we will own 90% of Beaupark. They, in turn, get the chance to do the work. Now, the interesting thing for you people out there, there's a club that they all belong to. It's called a Septo Club. And you have to be septuagenarian to be in it. So there's nothing funnier than watching the Septo Club going through the fields, you know, looking at these rocks. And I was there marveling at how these men found these rocks and these boulders out in the field and actually had the acumen and the education to get them assayed. Because there's lots of rocks in Ireland. There's no shortage of rocks. So off the back of that, we consummated our deal, and then we survived. Okay, we survived. Playfair is a surviving company. It's been around for a while. We do have other assets, tungsten assets. Incidentally, Cohen, what time is it there? We got 4 minutes. Okay, so sorry about that. The idea is that we had other assets. We put them all on the back burner and got concentrating on Ireland. And that's what, this is the Ox Mountains in Ireland. This is actually the other side of where we're working, but it was the longest, prettiest picture we could get, just to give you an idea of what the area looks like. So we're so far away from this production, okay? This is a brand new discovery. In all of humanity and you know, dinosaur time and everything else, this is the first time it's been known that gold occurs in this area. Okay, so here's a quick look at the big structures coming down. You can see Currino up there, and we're the little red blob over here. That we got about 170 square kilometers, and 2 different projects. I'd say the Clunicool and the Cabra. So we said about drilling. First of all, we had to raise some money. Now, talking about raising money, it was still bad market, but there had been a bit of a breather last year. I don't know if you remember back to last March, it looked like the world was going to end, and then it turned. Well, in that brief period of time afterwards, we had enough mining guys that saw the benefit of this particular project. This is as early as you can get. We were financed by some of the best mining people in town and in the country, and we really appreciate their, their participation in such an early stage project. And they've been backing us all the way. And for that, we're grateful. I think it's partly to do with the Septuagenarian Club. They got a sort of a bit of a feeling. They know we're not going to be around for the next bull market, so let's give these guys a chance this time, you know? So we said about drilling. Now, Gwen, where's the little pointer thing here? You don't know? Okay. Doesn't matter. Okay. We have 2 major areas. One is called Clunicool, one is called Cabra. And we know in both locations there's float. And we know in both locations, thanks to a regional district geophysical survey done by the Irish government, that we have geophysical expressions that we believe to be representative of structure. So when we started, we had float, nothing else. Then we had 1 vein in place. And then we had the TELUS survey, which showed us that structure. We've sort of doctored it up there to show you what the potential is. And the same at Cabra. There are different kinds of, the one at Cabra is a magnetic low, whereas this is an EM. The geologists talk about that stuff. The point is, we now had something to aim at. Up until that, we had nothing to aim at. We didn't know where the float really came from. So with that advancement, we raised the money through our good mining people, and we set about a drill program. And we went over there, we drilled 10 holes. Those 10 holes were concentrated, if you pretend you can see the thing here, in that little yellow circle up there. So it went up the vein about 200 meters across the structure. So we've covered roughly on a diagonal 200 meters by 200 meters out of what we now are convinced is the structure that all the float came from. The float was 9.8 grams, 17 grams, 3 grams, 0.5 grams, a wide variety of it. In that area that the float was in is represented by the big red circle. So that's all we had to go on. Most guys say, well, you got to have a better target drill. No, we had something to start with, and we started drilling. Now that we finished drilling, okay, we know that this structure, this geophysical expression is the structure. We have no doubt about it. We're 100% confident the float came from it, and we didn't see anything in this round of drilling that explains the majority of the float that we found. But we now know, because when we drilled, we saw a graphite horizon in the middle of the structure. And that graphite horizon is what you're seeing tracking across here. So we're highly confident that the geophysical expression is the structure. So we got something 4.5 kilometers long, 200 meters wide, We drilled 9 holes. All holes had gold in them of over 1 gram. The gold south of the graphitic zone, the holes north of the graphitic zone. We had gold in all of them. So we now have a target, okay? Incidentally, there's alteration here, which is not present at Curigno, and we got silica flooding, so there is a possibility some geophysics might help us. The confidence level has gone up, so we now think we have an orogenic system, 4.5 kilometers long, okay, completely unexplored, never been explored ever. I can't tell you that there's going to be anything worthwhile in it, but when I look at that, I think of Kirkland Lake, I think of Timmins, I think of Red Lake, all of these places that can produce. When these places start out, I don't know of any other structure that's had 9 holes and every hole has got gold in it on a first go-around. I think the odds against that are they're big. They're big odds against that happening, okay? And we did it. So with that confidence in our pocket, we're now going to go back and we're going to drill more holes. We're going to go east and west of that first little batch of holes, and we're going to see what comes out of the ground. I got good geologists say, well, you should use ground geochem, do more geophysics, whatever. No, we're going to go drill. After we drill, if this structure is worthwhile, we'll have all kinds of good ideas for you as how we're going to progress it. How much time? I'm done. Thank you very much for listening.